if Trump approaches the meeting in the way that he has approached some other issues, rightly or wrongly, with a degree of strength, America first, we're not having this, then Putin would get that message.
President Trump confirms he'll meet his Russian counterpart, President Putin of Russia. We're not quite sure where Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine fits into all of this. And I think, actually, Jack, it's interesting to hear the take of Ambassador Pfeiffer there, as well as the take of our World Affairs editor, Catherine Philp, who are anxious about this meeting because of the precedent. The previous meeting of these two resulted in, well, really a humiliating appearance, actually, by President Trump. And so, what are we to expect this time?
Well, I think that previous meeting back in Helsinki was almost certainly the low point of the first Trump presidency in terms of international relations and images during that whole 4-year term. And I think it is really, really important that that anybody who has any influence, internally or externally, makes clear to President Trump that if he, whatever we think of his slogans and whatever we think of some of his policies, if he truly wants to make America great again, he cannot make them play second fiddle to Russia and to Putin. And he has to be tougher, he has to be stronger, he has to stand up for Ukraine, and he has to stand up to Putin. I've met both these guys, but Putin is a long-term strategic thinker who's quite patient, prepared to be very violent, very determined, has a strategy for where he wants Russia to be. Trump is a guy who looks at opinion closely, follows closely people's opinion at home and abroad in relation to himself. And I think approaching him with a message that says, we are all watching you, and you need to be stronger. You need to be the leader of America, not some sort of shadow power to Putin and Russia. That is probably the only way to get him to do what he needs to do in this meeting.
Nikki, when it comes to European involvement, and I am including Ukraine, of course, in that conversation as well, are we all, Ukraine and the rest of us, all very much on the sidelines of this thing?
Well, worryingly, yes, and I mean, I completely agree with Jack's analysis, both of Putin, how you might appeal to Trump. I mean, the best thing that Trump could do, exactly Jack says, is in standing up for Ukraine, would be to insist, or even just to take with him at his invitation, President Zelensky, who absolutely should be in the room when this issue is discussed, and I think that therefore other European nations, whatever we can do. I mean, of course, we've got the Vice President J.D. Vance of the US, who is apparently having a weekend away at Chevening with the Foreign Secretary, and I think they do have a formal meeting, and no doubt Ukraine will be on that agenda. And so I think it's the best thing that the Foreign Secretary could do would be to absolutely push and push the US to include President Zelensky in that meeting, and that would, I think, really show that Trump was was both serious about peace, but also the fact that this is not going to be done without Ukraine's involvement, and not just done in a way that Putin wants, with no, as you say, no other third countries, particularly Ukraine, being involved.
This is obviously a high-stakes bilateral, as things stand, conversation between President Trump and President Putin. Jack, how do you prepare for a meeting like this? Because as a leader, a lot of it presumably is sort of instinct. Here's what I think is the right thing to do. But you'll also be fueled by advice from clever people around you, for sure, perhaps people in the room with you as well. But then you've got to kind of be quick on your feet in a meeting such as this, because the situation could be changing right in front of you and the advice suddenly goes out the window. There's a lot to juggle.
Absolutely. And I do think one of the problems, certainly in the first Trump presidency, was the president's inability to take a briefing, and then a lack of smartness in dealing with events as they unfolded in the meetings, and that was particularly true for the Putin meeting, but it was seen in other situations as well. However, when the chemistry was right, and when he was dealing with different other situations, then sometimes there could be a positive outcome. His relationship, for example, with Prime Minister Abe in Japan was probably one of the best in the world, and it was because Abe really approached it well and they hit it off. So chemistry is key here. In a meeting such as this, the strength of your demeanour will be absolutely central. I've been involved in a couple of fairly sensitive meetings over the last few weeks. And my remit in those meetings was to go in and make sure there was a second meeting, get the chemistry right, get some trust built, and then carry on the discussion at another meeting. At this meeting next week, the chemistry has to be all about strength, resolve, principles, determination, and Putin needs to see that loud and clear. And if something happens in the meeting when it's not expected, in that situation, you have to buy a bit of time. And there's no harm and danger in doing that. It's far better than trying to guess your way out the other end. But if Trump approaches the meeting in the way that he has approached some other issues, rightly or wrongly, with a degree of strength, America first, we're not having this, then Putin would get that message.
Yeah. Nikki, I know that in sort of years gone by, if I'm preparing for a particularly tough interview, I can think of one occasion where my editor and I role-played the interview. So I'd been researching the guest, so my editor said, right, you be him, I'm going to ask you questions, you answer how he's going to answer, and we'll work out the kind of best strategy of questions to follow up with. Have you ever role-played before a meeting? Perhaps with the Prime Minister or something, and you're like, right, what's the Prime Minister going to say? How can I get them on side with this? I wonder if that's the sort of strategising that genuinely sort of needs to be done.
I'm not sure necessarily sort of actually role play, but absolutely thought through with people. Yeah, certainly when you're in the cabinet and you've got meetings with number 10, particularly the Prime Minister, thinking about what's the other person going to say. Absolutely, definitely for interviews, and thinking through again. The best preparation for an interview is what do I not want Callum and Chloe to ask me in this interview, just in case for any aspiring politicians who happen to be listening. Think about the worst question and then think about how you're going to answer it. And of course, we know for all the political debates and everything else, that's exactly what people do, that they will have others role playing, various other party leaders. And I think, what Jack's saying is exactly right. I think, as you're saying, Callum, really, which is you have to think through, it's not only what you're going to do, what are your red lines, what are your principles, it's what's the other person going to do. Yeah. And I think where Trump could be very good, but could also, miss, which was, can you second guess? You have to think, what's in it for the other person? I think the difficulty with Putin is that I don't think he cares whether this meeting is a success or not. The court of public opinion in Russia is completely different from the court of public opinion in the US or elsewhere in the West, and so I don't. It's not clear what is in it for him for the meeting, whereas it's pretty obvious, I suppose, in a way for Trump, having said he was going to sort out Ukraine in 24 hours. The West is absolutely watching. But if you can get a sense of where the other person is, what's in it for them, what they want to achieve, how can you help them to meet their goals, then any meeting or debate or interview hopefully stands a better chance of success, or at least you coming out with the things that you want.